They thought you wouldn't notice. Rows of untouched bikes, glossy and perfect, yet untouched for months. Motorcycle dealerships across the country are collapsing, not from bad bikes, but from something far worse: buyer rebellion. This isn't just another sales slump, it's a breakdown of trust, money, and the very idea of what owning a motorcycle should mean. What's happening? Harley-Davidson's announcement of a sweeping diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative and a bold sustainability agenda felt less like progress and more like a repudiation to its most devoted riders. Loyal enthusiasts, veterans who have logged tens of thousands of miles on their rugged cruisers, expressed a profound sense of abandonment. They remember the brand as a symbol of uncompromising freedom, a thunderous trumpet that defied convention and celebrated the open road. Now, when executives extolled environmental stewardship and corporate social justice, those same riders felt their heritage had been hijacked by boardroom buzzwords. At regional rallies, grizzled bikers described the shift as corporate virtue signaling that shrank the roar of a V-twin into a meek corporate tweet. Amid heated online forums and hushed barside conversations at local Harley dealerships, the cultural chasm widened. Some remarked that the brand they loved seemed to have sold its soul for shareholder applause. Others feared that the roar of leather and chrome would be replaced by the quiet whir of batteries and boardroom monotony. As the first tremors of dissent rippled through clubhouses from Milwaukee to Santa Monica, it became clear that Harley's leadership had underestimated the depth of emotional ownership felt by its rider community. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in Milwaukee, internal memos circulated warning that alienating core customers risked catastrophic consequences. The stage was set. Harley-Davidson was about to discover how quickly betrayal can ignite a storm of revolt. Profit plunge. The day the sales died. The fourth quarter of 2024 delivered a staggering wake-up call. Quarterly earnings fell short by nearly $17 million, and Harley's stock price plunged by more than 20% in a single trading session. Financial analysts, once enchanted by the brand's blue-chip aura, scrambled to downgrade their ratings. Headlines in major business journals spoke of a staid American icon teetering on the brink of irrelevance. Dealers who had routinely sold 200 bikes per month found their lots eerily silent, with unsold inventory stacking like tombstones under dim showroom lights. One Midwestern dealership owner recounted the panic. Margins evaporated overnight. We offered 0% financing, free gear, even cash back, yet foot traffic kept falling. Internally, executives wrestled with the unthinkable notion that a company built on the visceral thrill of the ride could be swept aside by social controversy and shifting consumer values. Investors who once treated Harley shares as a retirement safe harbor now viewed them as a sinking vessel. As executives strained to draft damage control presentations, whispers of restructuring and cost cuts echoed through corner offices. From the echoing halls of Wall Street firms to the empty coffee bar in front of a silent showroom, the profit plunge made one thing unmistakably clear. Harley-Davidson's financial foundation had cracked, and repairing it would require more than a glossy corporate brochure. Digital Firestorm, the anti-woke revolt. Online, a new rebellion blazed across social media platforms. Disgruntled riders launched hashtags like Riders Not Politicians and Return Our Roar, galvanizing tens of thousands of voices in minutes. Viral videos showed bikers ripping up corporate banners outside dealerships, while live streams captured impassioned speeches railing against what participants termed brand betrayal. Motorcycle influencers with millions of followers documented their own boycotts, urging viewers to refuse new purchases until the company renounced its activist agenda. Within days, the digital firestorm spilled into the physical world. Groups of riders in custom leather patches staged silent protests outside flagship Harley-Davidson stores, clutching signs that read, "Make Harley Great Again," and "We want bikes, not politics." Dealership managers watched in shock as prospective customers sped past showrooms, cameras rolling on dashboards to capture their protest routes. The digital revolt had become a nationwide movement, unstoppable once it harnessed the raw fervor of a community that sees its motorcycle not just as a machine, but as an extension of personal identity. Following this tidal wave of online dissent, Harley's public relations team scrambled to craft responses, only to find that canned apologies and vague assurances could not douse the flames. The anti-woke revolt had become a defining moment, one that threatened to erode the very sense of belonging Harley riders once held sacred. Showroom rebellion, dealers in defiance. While public protests grabbed headlines, an equally potent uprising brewed behind dealership counters. Franchise owners facing plummeting sales and irate customers quietly defied corporate directives. In dozens of locations, staff removed diversity, equity, and inclusion posters from windows and substituted them with heritage banners featuring classic V-twin engines. In backroom meetings, several dealer groups agreed to offer unauthorized markdowns, effectively undercutting Harley-Davidson's official pricing strategy. One dealer in the Pacific Northwest confided, "We figured if corporate wouldn't listen to riders, we'd give customers a reason to keep coming in, no questions asked." Emails leaked from regional offices revealed directives from Milwaukee headquarters threatening license revocations for non-compliant dealers, but the threats largely fell on deaf ears. Dealers had concluded that short-term financial penalties were preferable to long-term obsolescence. This showroom rebellion fractured the once stalwart dealer network that had propelled Harley to iconic status. Customers accustomed to uniform branding and consistent pricing now encountered a patchwork of local initiatives. Some offering deep discounts, others staging open rallies in service bays where mechanics shared stories of their own disillusionment. The combined force of public protest and dealer defiance created a perfect storm, one that corporate headquarters had neither anticipated nor prepared for. At this pivotal juncture, Harley-Davidson stood at a crossroads, reconcile with its grassroots or risk watching its legacy fade into the deafening hum of oblivion. Corporate contradictions. Green dreams versus steel reality. In boardrooms filled with polished wood and executive bravado, Harley-Davidson's leadership plotted a grand transformation. They envisioned a brand reborn, one that would ride the wave of environmental consciousness, align with climate goals, and position itself at the forefront of sustainable transport. But out on the road, the message clashed with the metal. Loyal customers weren't asking for silent rides and zero emissions. They were asking for torque, for soul, for the rumble that defined a century of freedom. The rollout of electric prototypes like the Livewire was meant to dazzle younger riders and woo investors seeking green portfolios. Instead, it alienated longtime enthusiasts who saw the move as a betrayal of everything Harley once stood for. Critics weren't just upset about the silence of the ride, they were furious at the price tag. In an economy where many riders were tightening belts, Harley unveiled machines that cost nearly as much as a family sedan. Customers didn't see progress, they saw elitism. And worse, the logistics didn't add up. Charging infrastructure remained sparse across the long open roads where Harley riders loved to roam. Long-haul journeys became riddled with anxiety, with range limitations turning dream road trips into mathematical calculations of battery percentage and proximity to the next plug. This wasn't the open road. It was a boxed-in experience wrapped in modern anxiety. As financial and cultural rifts widened, Harley's green dreams began to look more like greenwashing, corporate jargon that failed to grasp the soul of its product. The brand split. Old riders versus new recruits. At the center of Harley-Davidson's crisis was a cultural identity fracture. On one side stood the old guard, riders in their 50s and 60s who wore their leather-like armor and treated their motorcycles like blood relatives. On the other side stood the elusive demographic the brand was desperately chasing. Young, urban professionals in search of weekend adventure and sleek minimalism. Harley tried to bridge the two worlds with a new generation of lightweight cruisers, marketing them with clean lines and digital dashboards. The result? Neither group was satisfied. Traditional riders viewed the changes as watering down their heritage, while new buyers saw the offerings as overpriced and out of touch compared to rivals like Triumph, Yamaha, and Royal Enfield. Focus groups conducted in 2025 revealed that even prospective millennial riders associated Harley with their dad's midlife crisis, not their own sense of modern rebellion. As sales stagnated in both demographics, dealers found themselves caught in a cultural crossfire. Some created distinct showrooms within the same space, one side dedicated to classic chrome and rumble, the other to clean designs and cafe aesthetics. Instead of uniting communities, Harley had built two silos under one roof. In failing to commit to either audience, the brand diluted its message and watched its once loyal base erode from both ends. What began as a rebrand had turned into a civil war. Boardroom panic, layoffs, and last chances. The fallout hit Harley's headquarters like a rogue thunderstorm. By mid-2025, top executives were facing pressure from shareholders, franchisees, and activist investors alike. Memos circulated announcing significant restructuring. Entire departments dedicated to long-term product innovation were slashed. Hiring freezes became layoffs. And while the company's public statements emphasized strategic reallocation, insiders painted a darker picture. A confidential leak from a senior vice president revealed that Harley had quietly paused development on two upcoming electric models. Sales projections had been revised downward 3 times in 6 months. Once a source of pride, the company's R&D labs in Milwaukee were now ghost towns, their lights dimmed and their parking lots half empty. One insider described the mood as survival mode. The board began revisiting older playbooks, considering returning to small displacement ICE models to win back budget-conscious riders. Simultaneously, negotiations began with foreign suppliers to cut production costs, reigniting fears of outsourcing and eroding the Made in America image. For Harley, the brand was no longer a promise. It was a liability. Panic had taken hold, and what remained was a company trying to outrun its own shadow. Meanwhile, in Canada, a neighbor turns competitor. North of the border, the landscape was shifting in ways Harley never anticipated. With Pierre Poilievre stepping in as Prime Minister, Canada's economic posture hardened into a pro-manufacturing, business-friendly force. Government subsidies were extended to domestic motorcycle production, and export incentives made Canadian brands suddenly attractive to American buyers, especially in the Midwest and Pacific Northwest, where import duties were minimized under new cross-border agreements. Startups like CanMoto and Novacycle, once regional oddities, began seeing exponential growth. Their motorcycles, built with domestic parts, modern engines, and aggressive price points, offered what Harley could not: a brand new machine with the spirit of rebellion, priced for real-world riders. Canadian manufacturers capitalized on Harley's PR stumbles by marketing themselves as motorcycles without the politics. At biker rallies in upstate New York and Michigan, Canadian vendors set up booths beside empty Harley display tents. Riders, curious for alternatives, took test rides and left with trade-in offers that made switching brands an easy choice. Harley's name, once sacred, had become a cautionary tale. As Canada rose quietly but confidently in the rearview mirror, Harley-Davidson faced a grim realization. It wasn't just losing the culture war, it was losing the border war too. When the rumble went silent, dealerships in revolt. It started as a murmur, subtle complaints from longtime dealers who had been with Harley-Davidson for 30, even 40 years. They voiced concerns over unsold inventory, unrealistic corporate targets, and a growing disconnect between what riders wanted and what Milwaukee was shipping out. But by the spring of 2025, the murmurs turned into mutiny. Across the American heartland, Harley dealerships began staging quiet revolts. Some refused to take new shipments of electric models they knew wouldn't sell. Others slashed prices far below Harley's suggested levels just to move metal and pay floor plan loans. In several key markets, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Arizona among them, dealership owners spoke to local press under condition of anonymity, describing the situation as financially unsustainable. A memo leaked from Harley-Davidson's Midwest regional manager revealed that nearly 1 in 4 dealerships had requested early termination of their franchise contracts. The company responded by tightening control. Audits increased, advertising guidelines became more rigid, and penalties for discounting were more strictly enforced. The reaction only deepened resentment. In dealer lounges, once adorned with pride and leather-bound contracts, there were now spreadsheets, stress, and silence. The once sacred handshake between Harley and its sellers had been broken, and in that breach, trust evaporated. Buyers walk away, empty showrooms, and lost generations. Step inside any Harley-Davidson dealership in the United States during the summer of 2025, and you will find something more unsettling than silence. Stillness. Rows of motorcycles, chrome polished to a mirror shine, sit unmoved under fluorescent lights. Not because demand is high and inventory is moving fast, but because no one is buying. These machines are not admired. They are avoided. It's not a fluke. It's not a blip. It is a generational exodus. Gen Z and younger millennials, once seen as the future of motorcycling, are walking away entirely. A recent nationwide study conducted by the Motorcycle Industry Council revealed that interest among Americans under the age of 30 had declined by nearly 20% over the past 5 years. Harley, in particular, ranked dead last in favorability among all major manufacturers, falling behind even niche European brands and electric startups. When researchers asked why, the answers were damning. Harley was viewed as outdated, environmentally disconnected, and for old guys with money. The rumble that once stirred the soul now irritates the suburbs. The big V-twin bikes that once symbolized power now symbolize excess. To this rising generation, Harley isn't rebellion, it's regression. Even among older riders, confidence in the brand has crumbled. Insurance rates on heavyweight cruisers have skyrocketed, especially in states like California and Florida, where theft and crash statistics have risen. Replacement parts are harder to find. Dealerships offer less support than ever, and as Harley continues to experiment with fragmented product lines, offering sport bikes, adventure bikes, and electric models all under the same brand, many veteran riders feel alienated. They don't know what Harley stands for anymore, and if Harley doesn't know either, why stay loyal? A former Harley salesperson in San Diego who worked for the company for over 12 years painted a bleak picture. There were Saturdays in 2015 where we couldn't even close the doors. So many people were walking in. Now, I've worked entire weekends where not a single person asked for a test ride. We don't even fire up the coffee machine anymore. The numbers back up the anecdote. Harley's domestic sales dropped another 9% in the first quarter of 2025. Even worse, foot traffic in urban showrooms fell by nearly 30% compared to the same period 2 years prior. The cultural collapse extended beyond motorcycles. Harley's branded merchandise, once a reliable cash cow, is gathering dust. T-shirts that once flew off shelves are now being sold in 3-for-1 bundles. Belt buckles, mugs, leather jackets, once symbols of identity, have been relegated to clearance racks. What used to be a movement is now inventory no one wants. And then there are the showrooms themselves. Large, echoing spaces where the air feels heavier than it should. A place meant to feel alive now feels like a museum, without the visitors. The media turns, from legacy to liability. Harley-Davidson had always enjoyed a degree of reverence in the American media. Motorcycle magazines showcased their latest cruisers with glossy spreads. News anchors romanticized their presence in patriotic montages. Even Hollywood kept the mystique alive, casting Harleys as cinematic shorthand for freedom. But by mid-2025, that honeymoon had ended. Motorcycle blogs that once praised Harley's innovation now ran exposés on failing dealerships and plummeting resale values. Business outlets like Bloomberg and CNBC aired segments on Harley's stock volatility, branding the company as a cautionary tale in legacy mismanagement. One particularly damning editorial in the Wall Street Journal was titled, "Harley-Davidson: How to Lose a Century of Loyalty in 5 Years." It wasn't just critique, it was indictment. The article traced Harley's downfall from the overhyped Livewire launch to failed international expansion efforts and questioned whether the company even knew who its audience was anymore. Social media piled on. Former riders shared photos of their trade-ins, tagging Harley's official account with captions like "should have stayed true" and "my last hog." TikTok creators posted viral videos mocking the electric lineup's sound or lack thereof. The silence that was once pitched as futuristic became the sound of failure. As Harley watched its public image spiral, executives scrambled to control the narrative, but it was already too late. America's most iconic motorcycle brand had become a punchline. Trump's return, tariffs, turmoil, and national pride. In the final blow to Harley-Davidson's corporate balancing act, former President Donald Trump returned to the White House in January of 2025. One of his first major economic policies was a new round of aggressive tariffs aimed at countries where Harley had outsourced parts and production, especially Mexico and China. Trump's speeches made Harley a centerpiece of his populist message. "We are bringing American motorcycles back to America," he declared at a factory in Ohio, flanked by steelworkers and Union flags. The crowd roared. But inside Harley's boardrooms, the mood was anything but celebratory. The reality was grim. Many of Harley's low-cost components were now subject to massive import duties. Assembly plants that had been moved abroad to cut labor costs suddenly became cost centers. To avoid massive financial losses, Harley would have to either eat the cost or raise prices further in a market that had already rejected them. Worse, Trump's administration proposed tax penalties for any American-branded companies with foreign labor footprints, which directly targeted Harley's overseas operations. What had once seemed like savvy globalization now looked like political suicide. Caught between investor demands, domestic expectations, and global logistics, Harley found itself without a winning move. It was too American to succeed overseas and too outsourced to win political points at home. As the trade war reignited under Trump's second term, Harley was one of the first casualties. Not just of tariffs, but of an identity crisis it had never resolved. Harley survives, but only in name. The brand lives, but not the belief. Harley-Davidson still stamps its name on metal. Dealerships still light up their neon signs, but what once roared has now been reduced to a whisper. It's the ghost of a company once fueled by culture, community, and conviction, now drifting on fumes of nostalgia and quarterly earnings. The electric pivot that was supposed to modernize the brand became a symbol of how disconnected Harley had become from its riders. Loyalists rejected the live wire not just because it was electric, but because it was empty. No rumble, no presence, no soul. For the brand that defined sound, silence was the final insult. What's left is a hollow shell, a few badge-engineered models for emerging markets, a luxury division marketed toward boutique buyers in wealthy urban enclaves, and a few license agreements slapped onto clothing racks in airport gift shops. The bikes? Still expensive, still heavy, still out of touch. In small towns across the United States, independent dealers that once thrived on community events and ride-ins now sit shuttered, their service bays converted into U-Haul depots or auto tint shops. Harley's supply chain, outsourced and fractured, limps along from assembly lines outside the country. Fewer parts are made in America. Fewer bikes are sold to Americans. And the message that once defined a way of life now feels like a faded bumper sticker. Proud, but past. Canada strikes back, and Harley pays the price. As Harley collapsed inward, another threat rose from the north. Canada's newly elected Prime Minister, young, pragmatic, and economically aggressive, did not view the United States with sentimentality. In the wake of Trump's renewed tariff wars, Canadian leaders retaliated strategically, and one of their clearest targets was Harley-Davidson. In a highly publicized move, the Canadian government imposed retaliatory tariffs on all imported American motorcycles, including Harley. In response, several provinces introduced subsidies for electric motorcycles made by domestic or European firms, including firms like Damon, Zero, and BMW. The result? Canadian dealerships stopped stocking Harley altogether. Sales fell so sharply that Harley was forced to shut down its last Canadian distribution office. A country once considered a key secondary market had simply turned the page. Canadian riders who once joined American rallies at Sturgis or Daytona now bought quiet, sleek machines that required no oil changes and made no political statement. And perhaps most devastating of all, some of Canada's rural Harley clubs, once fiercely loyal, rebranded and went independent. They still rode, but they no longer rode Harley. A political brand in a post-political market. In a world driven by identity and outrage, Harley tried to play both sides and lost them both. Donald Trump, now back in the White House, still speaks fondly of Harley-Davidson in speeches. He calls it a great American company and accuses its critics of globalist sabotage. But those words now ring hollow. Riders see the truth. Harley is no longer American-made. It no longer stands for freedom. It stands for corporate confusion and abandoned principles. Meanwhile, progressive states like California, Oregon, and New York began restricting internal combustion sales. Harley tried to relaunch the Livewire brand under a new identity, one focused on tech and sustainability, but it was too late. Tesla had already redefined cool. Younger riders were either on e-bikes or zipping around on Japanese hybrids with built-in navigation and AI tuning. Harley's last attempt to re-enter cultural relevance was a campaign dubbed Heritage Reborn. It featured old photos of easy rider, rugged landscapes, and lines like "Ride Free Again," but the reaction was muted. The problem wasn't the ads, it was the reality. Most buyers couldn't afford the bikes, didn't want the image, and no longer cared about the lifestyle. The final ride, and who takes the wheel? In the end, Harley-Davidson didn't go out in flames. It drifted into irrelevance. A brand that once led the road ahead now follows in the shadow of its competitors. And those competitors aren't just Japanese giants like Honda or Yamaha. They're tech-forward companies like Damon, nimble electric startups from Europe, and even Chinese players that offer better features for half the price. Trump's return to office created turbulence, but it also made one thing painfully clear: economic nationalism can't save a brand that no longer understands its own nation. When Harley moved production overseas, it wasn't just a logistical shift, it was an emotional betrayal. Riders knew it. Dealers knew it. Even Harley's own employees knew it. What remains now is the myth of Harley-Davidson. It lives in tattoos, in old films, in the dusty corner of a garage where an 88 still leaks oil onto concrete. It lives in the dreams of people who still believe in the open road, but who now ride something else. There are whispers in the motorcycle world that a group of private investors might buy back Harley, strip away the boardroom bloat, and bring it home. But it would take more than money. It would take vision, courage, and perhaps most of all, silence. The silence to listen. To the people, to the culture, to the road. Until then, the story of Harley-Davidson ends not with a roar, but with a question. Who will build the bike that makes America believe again? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and seriously, thank you for sticking with us until the end.